We don't run a shelter for cripples. Go sleep in your car. That was the only thing my mother said to me as she stared at my broken leg through the crack in the front door. She didn't even unlatch the safety chain. I held up my phone, showing her the bank app. The balance read 0. Yesterday, there was $8,500 in that joint account money I had scraped together for my surgery. She didn't apologize. She just shrugged and told me my brother, Jackson, needed the money to pay off a gambling debt. She looked right at my crutches, told me I was a financial burden, and slammed the door in my face. I stood there, locked out of my childhood home, realizing my family didn't just steal my money. They left me to rot. Have you ever realized your family viewed you as an ATM instead of a human being? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to see I'm not the only one. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. It is impossible to get comfortable in the back seat of a 10-year-old sedan when your leg is encased in plaster and your entire world has just collapsed. I parked in a 24-hour motel lot, hoping the security guard wouldn't tap on the glass, and stared at the fabric roof of my car. Every time I shifted, pain shot up my leg like a lightning bolt. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the clarity that was settling in my chest. It was cold, heavy, and absolute. You see, I'm a risk manager for a mid-sized insurance firm. My entire life is built around spotting liabilities before they become catastrophes. I look at balance sheets, safety protocols, and operational hazards, and I tell companies what they need to cut to survive. I'm good at it. I'm meticulous. But lying there in the dark, smelling stale coffee and rain, I realized I had committed the ultimate professional sin. I had ignored the biggest liability on my own books for 30 years. My family. I closed my eyes and the memories didn't wash over me like a wave. They lined up like line items on an audit. I remembered the year Jackson turned 25. He totaled his car driving under the influence. My parents didn't let him spend a night in jail. They refinanced their mortgage to hire a top-tier lawyer and bought him a brand new SUV 2 weeks later so he wouldn't lose his confidence. That same year, I was taking the bus to my unpaid internship because they told me gas money was a luxury they couldn't afford. I ate ramen for 8 months straight while Jackson posted photos of bottle service in Vegas on my parents' dime. Then there was Vanessa, my sister-in-law, the woman who looked at me like I was a stain on her perfect life. I remembered a family barbecue just 3 months ago. I was wearing a dress I'd bought from a thrift store, sensible, professional, cheap. Vanessa had laughed, sipping wine I had paid for, and fingered the strap of her Louis Vuitton bag. "You really need to invest in yourself, Odessa," she had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You look so... discount. It's embarrassing for Jackson." I didn't say anything then. I just swallowed the insult. But lying in my car, I did the math. That bag cost $3,000. $3,000 that my mother had borrowed from me the week before for home repairs. I hadn't paid for home repairs. I had paid for Vanessa to mock me, but the $8,500? That was different. That wasn't just money. That was my leg. That was my ability to walk without a limp for the rest of my life. I had worked double shifts, skipped meals, and saved every single cent to pay for a specialized orthopedic surgeon because my insurance deductible was a nightmare. By taking that money, they weren't just being greedy. They were deciding that Jackson's gambling debt was more important than my physical body. They were deciding that my pain was an acceptable price for his comfort. The sun started to come up, turning the gray sky a bruised purple. I sat up, grimacing as my joints popped. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, my hair was a mess, and I looked wrecked. But I wasn't. I opened my laptop, tethered it to my phone's hotspot, and opened a new spreadsheet. I didn't cry. I didn't call them to beg. I started typing. I listed every penny they had taken, every insult, every theft. I looked at the total, and then I mentally stamped right off across their names. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was just the quiet, reliable ATM who would limp away and come back when I had more cash. They forgot that an auditor's job isn't just to find the loss. It's to stop the bleeding. And I was about to close the account permanently. It took 18 months. 18 months of living in a studio apartment the size of a shoebox, eating discount tuna, and picking up every remote risk assessment contract I could find. I healed my leg without the expensive surgery, opting for a cheaper, longer physical therapy route that left me aching when it rained, but solvent. I rebuilt my savings brick by brick, fueled by a cold, quiet rage. And then, I found it. A foreclosure in a quiet suburb. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a wraparound porch. It was valued at $385,000, but the bank wanted it off their books. I bought it in cash, using an LLC to keep my name off the public records. Standing in the empty living room, smelling the dust and the potential, I should have felt safe. But I knew my family. They are like bloodhounds when it comes to money. If I just moved in, they would find me. Jackson would show up with a sob story about a loan shark. My mother would arrive with a casserole and a guilt trip, talking about how family helps family, expecting a spare key and a permanent guest room. I didn't want to hide from them anymore. I wanted to neutralize them. So, I didn't move my furniture in. I moved my trap in. I spent the first 2 days turning the house into a surveillance state. I installed 4K cameras with battery backups in the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway. They were tiny, hidden in smoke detectors and air vents. I tested the angles on my tablet until I could see every inch of the floor plan in high definition. Then, I set the bait. I took a photo of the front door keys, sitting on the granite kitchen island. I texted it to my mother with a caption that was carefully crafted to trigger every greedy impulse she had. Finally closed on a place. It's huge. But I have to fly to Dallas for work immediately. Won't be back for 3 days. Hope it's safe sitting empty. I knew exactly what would happen. She would show Jackson. Jackson would show Vanessa. And they would do the math. 3 days. An empty house. A sister who they thought was weak, but I needed more than just a break-in. Trespassing is a misdemeanor. It's a slap on the wrist. I needed leverage. I needed a felony. I went upstairs to the master closet. On the very top shelf, I placed a small, mahogany jewelry box. Inside, I nestled my grandmother's vintage emerald ring. It was the one thing I had managed to keep from them all these years, valued at $5,000. I didn't leave it out in the open, where they could claim they found it. I locked the box. I took the small brass key and dropped it into a junk drawer in the kitchen, buried under takeout menus and rubber bands. This wasn't carelessness. It was a test. To get that ring, they would have to hunt for the key. They would have to invade my privacy, rummage through my drawers, walk upstairs, and physically pry into my life. It required intent. I took one last look around the silent house. It didn't feel like a home yet. It felt like a stage. I walked out the front door, locked it, and drove 5 miles away to a budget hotel. I set up my laptop on the wobbly desk, opened the camera feed, and waited. I was betting everything on their entitlement. And I knew the odds were in my favor. I call this part the aquarium. I was sitting in a budget hotel room 5 miles away, the kind with stiff sheets and a view of a brick wall. My laptop was open on the desk. The screen split into a grid of 4 high-definition feeds. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't anxious. I was a scientist observing a chemical reaction I had engineered. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the first motion sensor tripped. On camera 1, the front porch feed, I watched my father, Robert, and my brother, Jackson, approach the door. They didn't knock. They didn't ring the doorbell. They didn't even hesitate. Robert pulled a cordless drill from a tool bag. Jackson held the flashlight on his phone, laughing at something my father said. They weren't visiting family. They were breaching a perimeter. The drill whirred. The sound was tinny through the laptop speakers, but the image was crystal clear. It took them 3 minutes to destroy the deadbolt. I saved the clip. File name: Breach 01. On camera 2, the foyer, the door swung open. Vanessa walked in first, spinning in a slow circle, taking in the high ceilings and the hardwood floors. "It's nicer than I thought," she said, her voice clear on the audio feed. She walked straight past the living room and headed for the stairs. "We'll take the master bedroom. Jackson, bring the boxes. Odessa can sleep in the garage when she gets back. It's got a heater." I didn't flinch. I just logged the timestamp. Intent to occupy. Then came the test. I switched the feed to camera 3, the master closet. This was the high-stakes table. I watched Vanessa walk into the closet, running her hands over the custom shelving. She spotted the mahogany box on the top shelf. She reached for it, found it locked, and frowned. Most people would stop there. A locked box in someone else's house is a clear boundary. But Vanessa isn't most people. She left the frame. I switched to camera 4, the kitchen. I watched her rummage through the junk drawer I'd carefully staged. She pushed aside takeout menus and rubber bands until her fingers closed around the small brass key. She smiled, a predatory, satisfied smirk. She went back upstairs. I watched her unlock the box. She gasped when she saw the emerald ring. This was the moment. If she just looked at it, it was snooping. If she took it, it was a felony. She took it out. She held it up to the mirror, admiring the way the green stone looked against her skin. Then, she turned to Jackson, who had just walked in with a suitcase. "Look at this," she said. "It's wasted on her. She's single and works all day. This ring deserves to be seen on someone with a social life. Besides, it's basically family property. Mom said Grandma wanted us all to enjoy it." She slid the ring onto her finger. Grand larceny. I saved the clip. File name. Theft evidence. 01. I leaned back in the hotel chair, sipping tepid water. The urge to call the police right then was overwhelming. I could have them arrested for breaking and entering within 20 minutes. But I didn't. I waited. You see, in the world of risk management, there is a concept called the greed blind spot. When a predator sees a prize that is too good to be true, their brain shuts down the peripheral vision that warns them of danger. They assume the door was left unlocked because they are lucky, not because they are being heralded into a cage. They were drinking my wine, painting my walls, and stealing my jewelry because they believed they were the main characters of this story. They thought I was the NPC who had glitched out and left them a fortune. If I called the cops now, it was a misunderstanding, a family dispute, a trespassing charge they could plead down to a misdemeanor. But the law in this state has a specific gray area. The 72-hour rule. If I let them stay for 3 days, their presence establishes a clear intent to occupy, which makes them liable for civil damages. But because it's under 30 days, they don't have tenancy rights. They are in the sweet spot, entrenched enough to commit serious property damage but not protected enough to require an eviction notice. I needed them to get comfortable. I needed them to do damage. I needed them to paint the walls and eat the food and sign for packages. I watched Vanessa pour herself a glass of my expensive red wine and put her feet up on my white coffee table. She looked like she owned the place. Enjoy it, I whispered to the screen. You're paying for it with your freedom. I closed the laptop, set an alarm for 72 hours later, and went to sleep. The trap was set. Now, I just had to let the rats get fat. Day 3. This was the tipping point. I watched the feed from camera 2. Jackson was standing on a ladder in the second bedroom, the one I had earmarked for a home office, rolling bright blue paint over the neutral beige walls. He wasn't just living there, he was modifying the asset. In the eyes of the law, that is criminal mischief. He was causing thousands of dollars in damage to a property he didn't own. It was time. I picked up my phone and typed out the text I had drafted 3 days ago. It had to be perfect. It had to stroke their ego and feed their narrative that I was the weak, broken sister who couldn't handle the pressure. Mom, you win. I know you guys are in the house. I can't fight you in the bank anymore. If Jackson wants the house that bad, he can have it. I just want $5,000 cash to move to Texas and disappear. I'll bring the deed tonight at 7. Let's just sign the papers and be done. Please. I hit send. On the screen, I saw Joyce's phone light up on the kitchen counter. She picked it up, read it, and let out a shriek of delight. She ran into the hallway, waving the phone. She folded. She yelled up the stairs. Jackson. Vanessa. She's giving it up. I watched them gather in the kitchen. Jackson came down the stairs, wiping blue paint on his jeans. Vanessa was beaming, actually clapping her hands. I told you, Jackson said, popping a grape into his mouth. She's weak. She never had the stomach for a fight. $5 grand? That's nothing. We're getting a $500,000 house for $5 grand. It's the least she could do, Vanessa added, opening my refrigerator and pulling out the steaks I had bought for my first week. I'm going to make a roast. A celebration dinner. We need to welcome her properly before we kick her out for good. I closed the laptop. My pulse didn't even jump. They were so predictable it was almost boring. They didn't question why I gave up so easily. They didn't wonder why I wanted to meet in person. They just saw what they wanted to see. A victory. At 6:45, I met Mr. Henderson in the parking lot of a nearby pharmacy. He was a large man in a cheap suit, carrying a leather notary bag. To the untrained eye, he looked like a bored bureaucrat. To me, he looked like insurance. He was a retired state trooper who now ran a private security firm. He was wearing a body camera disguised as a pen in his shirt pocket. Ready for this? He asked. Ready to close, I said. We arrived separately. Seeing my own house lit up, smoke curling from the chimney, felt unreal warm, domestic, stolen. I walked in without knocking. Rosemary and garlic filled the air. They were cooking in my kitchen. Joyce, Robert, Jackson, and Vanessa sat at the table like they owned it. Right on time, Jackson said, leaning back in my chair. Vanessa raised my wine glass. We saved you a seat. They radiated confidence. They thought I was surrendering. I'm ready to sign, I said, sitting at the head of the table. Joyce slid a plate toward me, lecturing about stability, sacrifice, and how I could recover because I was single. Jackson bragged about fixing the lock and painting the nursery. Vanessa flashed my grandmother's emerald ring and smirked. Instead of the deed, I handed them a single page. Just a liability waiver, I said. Since you've been living here for 3 days. They signed without reading. There is no deed, I said. I placed a rugged tablet on the table and hit play. The video showed Vanessa unlocking my closet safe, lifting the ring, and calling it family property. Silence slammed the room. You thought this was a negotiation, I said. It's an audit. I listed it calmly. Felony theft, burglary, and a signed confession. Jackson exploded. Mr. Henderson locked the front door. Sirens wailed outside. Jackson ran for the patio locked. I had engaged the safety locks days earlier. It's my house, I said. I decide who leaves. Police stormed in. Vanessa screamed, while an officer cuffed her, the ring still on her finger. Joyce protested. I handed over the affidavit and the footage. They were dragged out one by one. They wanted a house. They got a cell. Outside, neighbors filmed, as Joyce screamed that we were family. You're not, I replied. You're a bad investment. Afterward, Jackson and Vanessa took plea deals for burglary and grand larceny. He lost his job. She left him. I sued my parents for the money they stole and won. They were forced to sell their house. I rented mine out and bought a new condo under an LLC. Now I sit in my clean, quiet living room, blocking their calls. For the first time in 30 years, my ledger is balanced. If you believe family is loyalty, not DNA, subscribe. Never let anyone treat you like a line item.